Hello fear seekers, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be diving into some disturbing, allegedly true, urban exploration horror stories. Now, it is a dream of mine to read subscriber horror stories someday. With that in mind, I'd ask that you subscribe to the channel and like the video so we can make that happen together. Now, without further ado, sit back, ignore the unshakable feeling of habitation within these deserted halls, and get ready to ferment your fears. This is going to be a rather lengthy story, so please bear with me, guys. Back when I was in my early to mid-teens, around 2007 to 2008, me and a bunch of friends would regularly hang out at an old abandoned school. A very small school with only 8 classrooms, a teacher's room, a cafeteria, 2 bathrooms, and one room we had no idea what was in it since it was always locked. But I'll get back to that later. This school hadn't been able to keep up with the 80s modernization of our town, and the large number of newcomers that followed with it. And as such, it quickly closed down in favor of new schools and buildings by the end of the 80s. Most of the place was boarded up completely, but you could enter through a window in one of the classrooms, where the board had been ripped down. Our routine was always the same. Whoever of us got off school first would go down to the building and go through the different rooms to make sure everything was empty and safe, as these buildings had earlier been known as the local spot for drug addicts, and used needles and such was a common sight for us by this point. So this one day, me and a friend of mine were the first to get out of school, and as per usual, we take the walk down to the building. But upon entering and stepping out from the classroom and into the hallway, we immediately see a large man. I remember him as quite huge, but that might possibly be how he appeared to us as kids, and my friend lets out a huge scream. The man doesn't appear shocked or scared and doesn't seem to react to us, but he turns to look at us and then asks, "Have you guys seen..." insert my friend's name here. We tell the guy that we haven't seen anyone and only just got there, to which he sighs and shrugs and then pushes past us to leave the same way we had just entered. Now, our friend has an unusual name, so the chances that this guy was just looking for another random guy who just happened to have the same name were pretty low. But none of us had ever seen this guy before, and I happen to know most of said friend's family as well. When we described what the guy looked like to our friend, he didn't seem to know who this guy could have been either, and for the next few months we were too scared to go back. When we did return about 3 to 4 months later, it was the middle of summer vacation, and we thought it would be fun to climb up on the roof of the building and sunbathe. Upon climbing it, we found the roof to be rather weak and close to caving in, but something made us take the risk and dare to venture out on the roof after all. A hole in the roof which we figured would have to be directly above the room we had never been able to get in. The hole in the roof was only about the size of a football, and one of my friends came up with the idea to lower her arm down into the hole and film the room using her phone so that we could all see what the room looked like. She puts her arm down, and as she is filming, she suddenly lets out a blood-curdling scream and immediately retracts her arm, but her phone is no longer to be seen. She was certain something had knocked it from her hand, and as we looked down through the hole, we could see her phone laying on the floor. We climbed down from the roof and entered the building, now intent on doing whatever it would take to get in the room so our friend wouldn't have to return home without a phone and have to explain what happened to her parents. About 30 minutes later, we finally managed to make a hole in the door and put our hands inside, and when we try to use the door handle on the inside of the door now opens without any trouble. We step inside and we all stare in silence. To this day, I have no idea what this room was doing in a school building, and I sincerely hope it has never been used for what it looked like it was intended for. The room is about 4 by 4 meters, and the floor and walls are all of solid concrete. In the left corner of the room from where we entered was 2 metal bowls sitting on the floor, and at the back of the room were 5 chains dangling from the wall. 4 with equal-sized cuffs, and 1 large that looked like it would fit around a neck. Needless to say, we swiftly picked up my friend's phone and immediately left the place. However, the room had us both scared but also slightly intrigued, so after some talk back and forth that same night, we decided to go back to look at it again the following day. When we returned the next day, we found the door to be locked once again, and someone had covered the hole we made in the door with a large wooden board nailed to it. Once again, we immediately left, and after that visit, we never returned. I have no idea what we stumbled upon that day, but I am certain my days hanging out at this place is what sparked my interest in abandoned places. Today, I am an experienced member of the Urbex community, and have had much more sinister experiences with places like this that I might share with y'all some other time. Since taking up Urbex, it has been a dream of mine to go back to that school and check if that room was still there, but unfortunately, the place no longer exists, and the area is now home to a thrift store. My friends and I love to urban explore around our hometown of New Orleans in high school/early college. And by that, I mean we just hop in the car and drive with no destination, end up somewhere interesting looking, then get out and walk around. I've got a couple of stories, but this one still stands out in my mind. One night, a friend of a friend took us to a secret beach, which required walking over a hill past these train tracks, then through a small patch of woods. It was a small, sandy beach with overturned trees as benches. It had a view of the Mississippi River, and you could watch the large riverboats running up and down it. There were signs of people having been back there at some point, like trash scattered about. But we thought it was so cool and started a little fire pit out there and everything. He then told us about a ship graveyard that was a short hike through the woods. He showed us the way, and it was so neat. You trek through this footpath, then climb up this large dirt hill with giant pieces of metal jutting out of it to get back to the main attraction. It was basically the corpses of old ships in all manners of positions, as well as multitudes of old, large shipping crates. It seemed maybe, at one point, it was some kind of docking station, but had long since been abandoned. In the dead center of it was a small building. It looked as if it had been an office or something. Then there was a large metal structure made of tubes near a huge overturned ship. Like, the ship had sunk into the mud, and the front end was sticking straight up into the sky. It was wild. We walked around and noticed some of the crates were open, but none of us went to look inside. There was also graffiti on some of them, plus the building in the middle, which read the Rabbit Hole and had a bunny tagged on it. After maybe half an hour of walking around, we climbed out of the ship graveyard, walked back to the secret beach, smoked a couple cigarettes, and then went home. A few months later, a tropical storm hit. The following weekend, I wanted to impress this girl I liked at the time, and suggested our group of friends hanging out that night go back to the beach, since most of them hadn't seen it. We went back, and it was almost totally destroyed, just from the tropical storm. The log seats were moved about, the fire pit we had built was gone, and the path to the ship graveyard was a mess of debris and fallen trees/branches. We hung out on the beach, and I asked the group if they wanted to go see the ship graveyard. We had to take a weird alternate route through the woods from the normal path because the main footpath was still flooded over. We got to the back, and the climb up the dirt hill was a trek. It was sloppy and muddy, and the metal struts to climb in were sliding around. It was much more difficult than before, but we made it to the other side and everyone was astounded, and we walked around a bit. We found these giant fire extinguishers and they worked. We sprayed them around and they were loud. We ended up walking over to the rabbit hole building, and one of my friends climbed to the roof of it to see if there was a way inside. Almost as soon as he reached the top, he quickly scaled down and came back around and whispered, "Someone is back here with us," and pointed toward the metal tube structure next to the overturned ship. And sure enough, there was. Someone tall, large, rocking back and forth on the tube structure. Then we noticed there was a blanket or something hanging from the ship, as if she had climbed up and was squatting there. The girl I was trying to impress was suddenly very unimpressed, and we made our way back to the dirt hill. We turned around, and both the person and the blanket were gone. We proceeded to freak the hell out and started to move faster. As we got to the top of the hill, we could see him walking past the rabbit hole. A few of us got cuts and scrapes trying to climb the metal structures in the mud, but we were so in a panic we didn't even notice till later. We went the original way we came, away from the foot route, and I don't think any of us had ever felt a walk took that long to get back. We only whispered to each other as we moved, and when we got back to the beach, we took off past the train tracks, got into my car, and peeled off. To this day, I'm not sure who was back there, or why they were silently following us out, but it definitely was terrifying. We never went back. I know this sounds like a bad creepypasta, but I assure you, it's true. Here's a few pictures. Hey guys. So, after hearing about some of the threads up on here about scary/unexplainable stories that dot Reddit, I thought I would throw up a couple of my own. As an intro, I go by the name Holt, and I am an urban explorer living in Virginia. I got into urban exploration, or urbex, just because I loved the thrill of exploring places long since abandoned. But within that time, I have tended to come across some rather terrifying experiences. Depending on what kind of feedback I get, I'll see if you guys would like to hear any more. But for now, I'll throw up this one. One of my first experiences with the weirder and creepier side of urbex was when I first started back in 2014. About 2 counties over from where I live, there's a mental institution called Central State Hospital. Being on the older side of this county, remnants of the previous buildings from 1926 are still standing. From the historical documents and records that I uncovered while doing some research, Central State Hospital was built following the Civil War to aid in relief efforts for recently freed black slaves. But as time went on, the facility became one of its first in the South to offer mental hospitalization for black patients. The new building is now built right next to the old one. So after some digging, snooping, and spying, I finally worked up the gumption to break in and explore. Armed with a flashlight and a mounting curiosity and a pry bar, I pulled back one of the boarded up windows and crawled in. Not knowing what to expect, I began to wander the dark and creepy hallways of the old hospital, checking each room for anything interesting. The facility is basically one large square, with 4-story corners, most likely offices, 2-story corridors, and a now heavily wooded courtyard. Where I got in was the east front corner. I wandered most of the corridors until I found a stairwell leading downstairs. On the sublevel, it was a long corridor that held the autopsy room, morgue, and furnace room. Now, after an hour or so of looking around, reading old documents, and noticing some suspicious drug paraphernalia, I decided to make my way out, seeing as how it was going on midnight. As I turned around to leave, I note that the street security light that you could see from the bottom of the stairs was now absent. To my absolute horror, a massive black figure, about 8 feet tall, stood at the top of the stairwell. Now, being the 6'7" bruiser that I was, I did the most logical thing any man would do. I screamed like the wuss I was, ran up the stairs, threw the figure, out the pried-open window and into the loving arms of Petersburg's finest. Slapped with a potential trespassing charge and sitting in the back of a police cruiser, I was questioned about the screaming. When I told the officer what I had seen, he turned about as white as a sheet. Apparently, since him and his partner started doing rounds on the property, they had constantly seen apparitions all along the open windows at the top floors. Needless to say, I got off with a slap on the wrist and a no more kind of deal. Let me know if you guys want to hear more. When I was in high school, my friends and I got really into exploring abandoned places. We used to research places along the East Coast and drive during the summertime to check them out and take cool pictures. This one time, a kid we knew in my buddy's class told him about this abandoned mental asylum in Maryland that was really cool because unlike most places, it was a 5-building complex with a large center building that was 3 stories tall. I forget the name, but if anyone knows what I'm talking about, feel free to share. Naturally, this piqued our interest, so that weekend we told our parents we were going on a fishing trip to Maryland, and 6 of us road trip to go see this place. We started out by checking out the smaller building in the complex when we first got there, and slowly made our way around the area to look out for security. To give a sort of layout to the asylum, all of the buildings connected to each other aside from the main building and the church that was behind it. So as we entered the first building, we decided to pull a Scooby-Doo and split up to cover more ground. I got paired with a kid in the group that didn't really want to be there to begin with, and we went down to the basement of the building. As we went down, I saw that there was a crude doorway near the staircase that was out of place from the other large hallways upstairs. I convinced the guy I was paired with to check it out on the condition that I went in first. The layout of this room was kind of like a ramp, so if you kept walking further in, it would get closer to the ceiling and a lot darker. We had one flashlight, which I gave to my friend, and I was using my phone flashlight. So as I walked in, I naturally got drawn to walk straight back while my buddy went to the left side instead. I remember saying to him as we were inside, "Damn, this place smells awful." And when I turned around, the guy I'm with speed walks towards me and says that we need to leave, now. Thinking he was just scared, I didn't argue with him and we left, and I didn't think much of it for the rest of our time there. Later that week, my friends and I are at a party and we're telling people all about this asylum we just explored. I start telling people about the main building and the guy I was paired up with comes by to hear what we're talking about. As I start talking about the basement and the room we were in, he pauses the story. He then tells me that the reason he made us leave so fast was because as I was saying that place smelled like crap, he saw that the left side of the room had furnaces and piles of old shoes and white medical patient clothes. We were in the morgue, and I had no idea. Hey guys, glad to see you made it to the end of the video. Have you ever done any urban exploring? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. If you have any stories to share, or you just want to hang out and chat with the community, you can reach out by Discord, email, or Reddit. Links in the description. If you have any requests for future videos, be sure to let me know. Alright guys, that just about wraps up the video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So long, Fear Seekers. I'll see you in the next video.
He's not dead.